There's been mixed reaction to the budget delivered by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana this past week. Labour unions have accused the minister's budget of being anti-poor, while once again bailing out poorly managed state-owned enterprises. For more on this, we're joined by Mametlwe Sebei, who is the president of the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa. Thank you, Mametlwe, for making time for us. Why do you believe the budget delivered by Enoch Godongwana failed the poor, the working and the middle class?
I think we've got to say that if there was ever a case for a revolution in this country, it is this budget. Because in this budget, what the ANC has revealed is that it has abandoned a pretense that it can resolve the crisis of unemployment, which include 7.7 million young people who are not employed, many of whom are not in any form of education, in any form of employment, any form of training, and of course, some of whom are only going to increase the number because this year, 4 million young people applied for a handful of first-year enrollment opportunities in universities. And there is no money in this budget to expand and, of course, to open doors of learning for many of these young people. There is no money and provision for a mass public works program to resolve the issues of millions and millions of people who are expecting government to lead in resolving the crisis. There is absolutely no plan to turn the situation at ESCOM except that they are handing it out the money basically to facilitate a privatization, because what that money is going to do is not going to overcome the crisis of load shedding, the crisis of astronomical levels of tariff increases. It is meant to say ESCOM must reduce its debt in order to be attractive to investors, in order to privatize electricity generation, in order that it can be privatized the way that ANC always wanted, and it has been mismanaging, sabotaging, looting and plundering it for that purpose in order to discredit it in the public view. All
right, let's actually talk about that, ESCOM, right? The biggest focus was, in fact, the energy crisis at the budget speech, and perhaps the important announcement was on that decision to take over 50% of ESCOM's debt, which is very clear you didn't take kindly to that. But do you think that the Treasury had a choice here? Did government have a choice? Because if ESCOM doesn't work, nothing works. The cost of fixing the power utility is, in fact, going to be far less when you compare it to the cost of the rolling blackouts.
Nobody says that government shouldn't do anything about that debt. Our view is that most of that debt is an odious debt. There is a debt, that is a credit extended to ESCOM by people who had a corrupt interest, or at least were aware that the money that was being used in the so-called construction of Medupi and Kusile was actually not going to the actual construction. Those two power stations, Kusile and Medupi, overran the initial cost and estimation by over 300 billion. When the IMF and other big creditors extended loans, they were fully aware that one, the money is going to companies that are part of the whole ANC looting and plundering spree of ESCOM and state-owned entities. They were aware that these are coal power stations that we are going to be under pressure to move away from, and because as we are speaking now, there is a pressure and, in fact, punishment of many industries that are relying on coal and other fossil fuel for energy, and because the world want to move away from fossil fuel because of the crisis of climate, which more than anybody else, by the way, as South Africans, and of course, as the working class in particular, we should be not only concerned about, but leading in the struggle to ensure that that crisis is overcome, because the devastations that we have seen of floods in Mpumalanga and other areas, but also in Durban last year, but also of heat waves and other climate disasters, say this is a crisis that is here.
I guess where I'm trying to get to, Mametlwe, is did government have a choice? Because if it's not bailing out ESCOM, the so-called working class that you speak for is going to continue feeling the brunt of the continued power cuts. In order to avoid the high levels of load shedding like we are now at stage 6, at least in the short term, ESCOM needs money to buy diesel. I mean, let's say at stage 6, we're losing about 4 billion rand each day. If you don't burn diesel to power the gas turbines to keep the lights on, we are going to stay on high levels of load shedding like stage 6 and 4. and then we're going to continue losing the 4 billion rand each day. So the result of this debt relief is that Eskom will not require further borrowing during the relief period, which is great because this eases off the pressure on Eskom's balance sheet. They can now buy diesel to avoid the higher stages of load shedding and even invest in the grid. If they don't do that, the working class that you represent are going to continue losing jobs. Businesses are going to continue shutting down.
We are not objecting in that sense to government doing something about that debt. That debt has to be done away with. There is absolutely no doubt in our mind about it. But I'm saying to you that the bailout of Eskom is on the condition that Eskom sell what viable coal power stations it has. And once Eskom is divested of viable power stations, what do you think would remain of Eskom? I'm saying that the ANC is basically serving poison with this bailout in order to force and impose on Eskom a program to privatize it, which will be far worse for the working class because you just have to look what is happening in Europe at the present moment. And in that situation, when electricity is unaffordable, not only to the working class and the poor who we represent, but also many small business people, the situation is only going to get worse, both because these small business people are going to pass the cost of that in many products, goods and services that they provide to the working class, but more than that, many more jobs are going to be lost and many more industries are going to be devastated. What are we proposing? We are proposing that those creditors that extended this credit to Eskom, fully aware that this is the money for corrupt gangsters that have captured Eskom, as it is now also confirmed by the former or outgoing CEO of Eskom, but also that it's not just those credits that must be cancelled. It must also be that, there are industries. I mean, coal in particular, the corporate coal mining is shrinking Eskom. You just have to look at deals that Eskom is doing. Firstly, with, big coal suppliers like Siriti, like Trencom. I mean, Siriti took a company, an Australian miner that was supplying coal to Eskom. On the basis of the takeover of Siriti, a cost of that coal increased immediately by 30%. These are things that are crippling Eskom, but also a cheap and often below a cost of generation electricity that Eskom is supplying to so-called energy-intensive users groups. That is also what is crippling Eskom. And that's the reason that we are saying the working class must fight for a democratic control and management of Eskom so that we can have Eskom functioning as a public service in the interest of the people of South Africa, in the interest of the working class and the poor in particular. And for that, the working class have to step up the campaigns. We must picket the megawatt park. We must also show that we occupy the post office that are faced with the closures. We must step up the fight and resist this onslaught with this budget confirmed.
All right, let's talk about the tax measures that were announced to encourage investment in renewable energy, even the tax incentives for individuals to install rooftop solar panels. You can claim now a rebate of about 25% of the cost of the panel. I think that's up to a maximum of 15,000 rand, if I'm not mistaken. Do you feel that, this doesn't benefit the working class, so it's a relief, but a relief for the rich and the middle class?
Yes, I mean, the whole fiscal policy of this government is redistributing the wealth from the poor, from the working class to the rich. In actual fact, the ANC in the past 28 years, it has facilitated such a massive transfer of wealth that even apartheid has not been able to do. That is the reason that under a democratic South Africa, we have, achieved the infamy of being the most unequal society in the world. That has got to be a shame. That is a criminal indictment on the ANC, and of course, it's the trial for the struggle for liberation of this country. Because what was the liberation about? It was about ending inequality. It was about ending the oppression of the black working class majority in particular. And today than ever before, many people feel that things have gotten worse than they were under apartheid. It is indictment that we have not achieved even the most modest demands of the struggle against apartheid in this country. Many of our people are living in appalling informal settlements where conditions are worse than you will ever wish, even for your own pets. And many people are without any hope for a future because of devastating levels of unemployment. But also just look at statistics for crime. I mean, we are having a situation where in the past 3 months alone, 7,555 people were murdered in this country. In Syria, which is officially at war, right? Less than 70 people were murdered in the month of November alone. So it is more safe to live in Syria, in the war situation in Syria, than it is to live in South Africa. That is an indictment on the ANC, and that for me is a call, a clarion call to the working class to rise in this country. We need a revolution in this country. As of yesterday.
All right, so a network really disappointing us there towards the end of that conversation with Mametlwe Sebei.